About the current situation in the Labour Party. All right, Rupert, tell me, what do you make of what happened yesterday?
Well, Nick, it was fascinating for me because listeners of a certain age, like myself and perhaps yourself, will remember at least dimly the 1980s and the SDP, the foundation of the SDP, 28 years ago when a group of prominent Labour MPs broke away from Labour and formed a new party. And back then, as a teenager, Nick, believe it or not, I was a huge supporter of the SDP. I thought this was very exciting, thought this was the new politics. That's what they called it, exact same phrase used by the Seven yesterday. So it gives me a terrible sense of déjà vu, and I use the word terrible advisedly because I think this is just a complete rerun of something that failed in the 1980s. There's absolutely no reason to believe that it's going to succeed now.
What's interesting, though, is they are talking about proportional representation. They are talking about parties fragmenting and getting more voices in the chamber. That's something you do support.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There are one or two positive aspects to this, and the one you just mentioned is definitely the most positive aspect. Our system in this country is absolutely crying out for proportional representation, for electoral reform, for broader democratic reform now. And imagine a situation where you have an election, you have a Labour candidate, a Conservative, a Liberal Democrat, someone from this new group of seven, a Green. You could have 5 parties, maybe UKIP as well. You could have 6 parties vying for support. One of those parties could win on our stupid, outdated electoral first-past-the-post system with something like 20% of the vote. And the other 80% of votes would be wasted. So absolutely, if this party is going to go ahead, if there is going to be a new party from these people, it does indeed make the case for proportional representation even more urgent. And obviously, we in the Greens have been saying that for years.
But what's interesting here is, do you think that there is a fruitful territory in the centre ground of British politics which is not being inhabited at the moment, and that there is room for another political party and movement to grow in the centre ground? And it could have a big appeal for Conservative Party members who are looking at the current direction of the Conservative Party, and they don't like it. It's got great appeal, as we can see, for Labour Party voters who don't like Jeremy Corbyn and the direction he's taking the Labour Party. This could potentially be quite successful.
Well, yes and no. On the one hand, I think you're right. There is some potential room in the so-called centre ground of British politics, and it would be interesting to see in coming days if this new grouping does attract some Conservatives, for example, which would be a significant change, obviously, in British politics. But what I was saying a couple of minutes ago, Nick, was that the thing about this new grouping is that they offer essentially nothing new. They're offering the same old clapped-out solutions of so-called centre-ground moderate politics that were there back in the 1980s and that failed then. What we actually need in 2019 and in the 21st century is genuinely new thinking that actually responds to the challenges of our age. And quite clearly that thinking has to be green thinking. The Green Party is the party of the 21st century, not this group of 7, because we are the only party that is serious about the great challenges of our age. The extinction crisis, all the species going extinct around us, half of the world's wildlife has gone during my lifetime. The climate crisis, these are going to become food crises and much worse if we don't get a handle on things soon. So I would say, on the one hand, yeah, there is some potential room for this force in British politics, but on the other hand, it would be far, far better for British politics if people actually looked forward, not back.
But despite your dire warnings, actually the Green Party hasn't managed to really get a foothold in British politics. It hasn't managed to get widespread support. So wouldn't you be better trying to channel those kind of arguments through a vehicle such as this new group to try and get them to take on some of these arguments, because they might give it an air of centre ground credibility with the electorate, and then they might be more successful in trying to push those ideas across to the public?
I think this new grouping has very little serious to offer in relation to these great challenges of our time. I read their founding document yesterday. It mentioned climate in passing. It focused on old concerns to do with a so-called strong economy and things like that. Nick, the thing is that the Green Party is a party whose time is probably yet to come. Tragically, we're yet to see the full impact of the climate crisis, of the extinction crisis. When we do see it more, and we are starting to see it now, and that's why you're getting movements like Extinction Rebellion and the school strikes for climate, when we do see it more, people are actually going to get serious, and they're going to swing behind the Green Party, and this new grouping will be completely forgotten.
If you have a look at some of the MPs who have moved away from the Labour Party, let's just start with Angela Smith. I'm just checking her majority. It's a very slim majority, just 1,322. Chukwuemeka, his majority is 26,000. Chris Leslie's majority is 19,500. Luciana Berger, I think it's nearly 30,000. Her majority, yes, 30,000 is her majority. So these are MPs with huge majorities for people who have voted for the Labour Party candidate. Do you think automatically now they should face a by-election because they are no longer representing the Labour Party, which is what the electorate voted for?
Well, this is essentially an issue that only makes sense within the paradigm of our existing political and electoral system. What we actually need, and as we said a few minutes ago, this is the one issue on which I think this new grouping are clearly right. What we actually need is a new system. People have lost faith in our politics, and to some extent rightly so. One reason why they've lost faith is the terrible unrepresentativeness of the system. So if you had a proper system, a proportional representation system, where seats were proportional to votes cast, this kind of issue just really wouldn't arise.
On that point, though, we talk about first past the post and people are very critical of it. It's not really representative of the way in which the electorate voted. I mean, you could argue it's absolutely bonkers that the SNP have got so many MPs when the Green Party, when the Liberal Democrats, when the UK Independence Party had a bigger share of the vote but have got less representation in the chamber.
Yeah, that's right.
And that makes perfect sense. What would you say to those who say, but here comes the problem with proportional representation? First past the post tends to deliver strong governments, whereas proportional representation, though it's great in terms of trying to get people to work together in consensus politics, you'd have to water down manifestos so much that people wouldn't really know what they're voting for, and governments would only really last for an incredibly short period of time because small kingmaker parties would give and withdraw their support as they wish, and actually what it would lead to is a great weakening of British politics.
But surely you can recognise the irony in what you're saying. In 2019, as we're in this ridiculous crisis around Brexit, with a government which cannot get anything through, is being defeated by hundreds of votes in Parliament, surely it's now clear that first past the post does not necessarily deliver strong governments. And we are being badly let down by our current so-called democratic system. We are being badly let down by Parliament. The Brexit crisis makes it clear that we need a thorough constitutional shake-up. And if this new group of seven manage to get that up the agenda, well, they will at least have done one service to British politics.
What if I said to you, OK, I can accept proportional representation. It's very hard to argue against PR, actually, as a fairer, better way of representing the votes of the public. But what if you put a safeguard in place and you said, right, we'll have proportional representation, whichever form of PR we go for, but also we will have a First Minister, the Prime Minister, and that will be a separate vote. So people will vote for the individual, they'll vote for the Prime Minister, who will then have to push their legislation through the chamber, which will be made up of various parties. And that way you've got a safeguard in place, so you won't see the chop and change of the incumbent in number 10. It won't be, people facing 1 year in power before they're deposed.
Well, that's an interesting suggestion. I think in practice what you're suggesting there is a move to sort of a hybrid parliamentary and presidential system in effect, something a bit like what they have in France, for example. I think that would be a change that would have some advantages, but it would also have some pretty clear disadvantages. Among the disadvantages would be that there would be a risk, as you sometimes get in France, of a sort of overweening president/prime minister who was really detached from the people and certainly detached from the parliamentarians. And we in the Greens wouldn't really support that. We think that actually there's often been too much power vested in the Prime Minister in this country, and the change that you're suggesting might make that situation even worse.
So I was actually going to say the opposite. I was going to say that would be your best chance of getting someone like Caroline Lucas as the Prime Minister of this country.
Right. I mean, she is pretty clearly the best parliamentarian in Britain. Wouldn't it be lovely?
Listen, I'm not going to compromise my impartiality, but there's things that she says which I think which would play very well with the electorate and give her a good platform. So if she became her problem is, this is where the issue then is in reverse, she'd really struggled to get anything through any chamber, and she'd have to water down her message hugely to actually get anything done that she wants to get done, which the people have voted for. Either way, we're locked, aren't we?
Well, yeah, I think that the better scenario from a Green perspective would be to get more MPs in to strengthen her arm. What we also need, one more point in relation to this, Nick, is we need a change to our politics and to our democracy which actually involves people more. And this new grouping are offering nothing around that. Whereas in the Green Party, for example, we have quite a lot of ideas around that, as do Extinction Rebellion with their very interesting proposal of citizens' assemblies to sit alongside parliamentary assemblies where ordinary people, like on a jury, can
But wouldn't that just be like a local council chamber? I mean, how's that any different to what we're seeing down the road at County Hall?
Oh, well, the difference would be that the people in question wouldn't be elected. They would be selected by at random, as juries are selected at random from the people. They would be like a kind of super jury who would sit together and deliberate. And so it would be ordinary people rather than just councillors who are involved in making decisions. What
was Winston Churchill's famous quote about democracy? The greatest argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Anyway, Rupert, good to have you on the programme this morning, as ever.
Thanks.
You take care. Catch up soon. Rupert Read there from the Green Party.